I need a man who can plant a seed of an heir deep and steady," the widow said to the lonely cowboy. Clara stood on the porch of her large ranch house, her hands resting on the railing as she watched the cattle move lazily across the fields. The wind carried a faint scent of hay and dry earth, a smell she had grown to love over the years. Life on the ranch was quiet, predictable, and sometimes lonely, but Clara had learned to find comfort in the rhythm of her days. She was a widow now, and the years since her husband's passing had been both challenging and enlightening. She had managed the ranch alone, keeping the land and livestock in excellent condition, earning the respect of neighbors and travelers alike. Yet, despite her independence and strength, a part of Clara felt incomplete. She had inherited the ranch from her family, a legacy that had been in their hands for generations, and she knew that one day she would need someone to continue that legacy. She wanted an heir, not just for the sake of tradition, but because she longed for someone who could carry a part of her, someone who could grow up with the land, love it as much as she did, and understand the pride of working with one's own hands. But finding a man she could trust, a man steady enough to provide not just a child but stability, was not an easy task. That evening, Clara decided to visit the local saloon, a small but lively place where ranchers and travelers often stopped to rest and share stories. She had not been there in years, preferring the solitude of her home, but tonight felt different. Tonight she needed a plan, and perhaps a conversation could spark it. The saloon smelled of wood, smoke, and strong coffee. A few men and women were scattered around the room, chatting quietly or playing cards. Clara's eyes scanned the room, not searching for anyone in particular, but hoping to spot someone who seemed different, someone who carried an air of strength and reliability. Her gaze settled on a man sitting alone at a corner table. He wore a worn-out hat and dusty boots, his shirt showing signs of long days spent outdoors. There was a quiet confidence about him, a kind of calm presence that drew her attention. He looked like he belonged to the land, as if he had grown from it and understood it in ways only someone who had spent their life under the sun could. Clara approached him cautiously, unsure how to begin a conversation with a stranger, yet determined to speak her mind. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, her voice steady. The man looked up, his eyes a deep shade of brown, and for a moment there was silence. Then he nodded, a small, polite gesture that invited her to sit. "Sure," he said softly, his voice carrying a calm authority. "Name S. Jack." "Clara," she replied, taking a seat across from him. For a moment they simply observed each other, two strangers sharing a quiet connection in the midst of the saloon's subdued energy. Then Clara, taking a deep breath, spoke carefully. "I have a request," she said, her tone serious but not unkind. "It's not an ordinary one, and I hope you'll understand why I'm asking." Jack raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "I'm listening," he said, leaning slightly forward, curiosity evident in his posture. Clara paused, choosing her words with care. She explained her situation, her longing for an heir to continue her family's legacy, and her desire for someone steady, someone reliable, to help her with this important responsibility. She spoke honestly, without embarrassment or hesitation, knowing that honesty was the only way to find the right person for such a delicate matter. Jack listened quietly, absorbing every word. He was not shocked, nor did he laugh or dismiss her. Instead, he considered her carefully, sensing the gravity behind her request. There was something genuine in Clara's eyes, a quiet determination that spoke louder than words. He knew this was not a casual proposition or a fleeting desire. This was a plan born of responsibility, hope, and a deep connection to the land she cherished. After a moment of thought, Jack nodded slowly. "It's unusual," he admitted, "but I understand. I can't promise anything yet, but I'd like to know more about what you have in mind." Clara smiled, a mix of relief and anticipation washing over her. She had expected hesitation, maybe even rejection, but Jack's willingness to listen gave her hope. They spent the next hour talking, not just about her request, but about life on the ranch, the challenges of raising livestock, the importance of family, and the quiet beauty of the plains. Jack shared stories of his travels, of hard days under the sun, and nights spent beneath the stars. Clara listened, intrigued by his experiences and impressed by his resilience. As the evening grew darker, the saloon's lights casting a warm glow over their table, Clara realized that this meeting was the beginning of something important. It was not just about finding a man who could help her with an heir. It was about discovering someone who could understand her, respect her, and perhaps, in time, become a part of her life in ways she had not anticipated. Before leaving, Clara invited Jack to visit her ranch, to see the land she spoke of with such pride. Jack agreed, curious to witness the world that had shaped Clara into the woman she was. They parted with a sense of anticipation, both feeling that this encounter, though unusual, held the promise of something meaningful. As Clara walked back to her house under the starlit sky, she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She knew that life on the ranch would continue to be challenging, but for the first time in years, she felt a spark of hope. Perhaps with Jack, she could find not only a man to fulfill her request but also a companion, a partner who shared her values, her dreams, and her love for the land. Jack, meanwhile, rode back to his small cabin on the outskirts of town, his mind occupied by thoughts of Clara and her ranch. He had lived a solitary life for years, wandering from place to place, never staying long enough to form attachments. Yet something about Clara and her honesty drew him in. He found himself imagining the ranch, the wide-open fields, and the possibility of being part of something larger than himself. That night, both Clara and Jack lay awake, each contemplating the unusual circumstances that had brought them together. Neither knew what the future held, but both sensed that this encounter was significant. Clara's request was bold, her intentions clear, and Jack's curiosity and willingness to listen created the first fragile bridge between two very different lives. The plains stretched endlessly under the moonlight, silent and watchful. Somewhere between the whispering wind and the rustling leaves, a plan had begun to take shape, a plan that would require trust, patience, and courage. Clara had taken the first step in seeking her heir, and Jack had taken the first step toward a life he had never imagined. The evening had ended, but the story was only beginning, promising challenges, discoveries, and perhaps the beginning of a partnership that neither had expected, yet both quietly hoped for. As dawn approached, Clara looked out at the fields one more time, feeling the soft breeze on her face. The ranch was her home, her sanctuary, and soon it might become a place of new beginnings. She knew the journey ahead would not be simple, but for the first time in years, she felt a sense of purpose that was deeply personal and profoundly important. And somewhere not far away, Jack was thinking of the same horizon, imagining what might come if he accepted this unusual request and embraced the opportunity to be part of something truly meaningful. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the plains, casting long shadows. Across Clara's ranch, the air was crisp and fresh, carrying the scent of wildflowers, hay, and the faint smell of the nearby river. Clara moved through her morning routine with careful precision, checking the fences, feeding the animals, and making sure the crops were in order. Yet today there was an added sense of anticipation. She had invited Jack to visit the ranch, and though he had agreed the night before, she wondered what he would think of the life she led. By mid-morning, Jack arrived on horseback, his tall frame moving easily in the saddle. He carried a quiet confidence, the kind that came from years of working with the land and traveling alone. Clara met him at the gate, her expression steady but welcoming. "Good morning, Jack," she said. "I hope you're ready to see what life here is really like." Jack smiled, tipping his hat. "I think I'm ready. I've seen a lot of land in my time, but something tells me this place is different." Clara led him along the main path, showing him the barns, the stables, and the open fields where the cattle grazed. She explained her daily routines, how she managed the crops, and how she trained the animals. Jack listened carefully, asking questions that revealed his genuine interest. It was not just curiosity. It was the kind of attention that came from someone who understood hard work and respected the effort it took to maintain a place like this. As they walked, Clara talked about her late husband, the history of the ranch, and the dreams she still held for the future. Jack shared stories from his travels, tales of distant towns, dusty trails, and long nights under the stars. There was an easy rhythm to their conversation, a give and take that made the morning feel lighter, even as the sun climbed higher in the sky. After the tour, Clara led Jack to the barn. "This is where a lot of the work happens," she said. "It's not glamorous, but it's honest work. If you're going to be here, you need to understand every part of it." Jack nodded, his eyes scanning the barn's interior. There were tools neatly arranged, hay bales stacked in perfect order, and a small area for tending to sick or injured animals. "I can handle hard work," he said simply. "I've spent years doing it, though maybe not in a place this big." Clara smiled, appreciating his humility. "That's good to hear. This ranch isn't easy to manage, but it's worth it." Over the next few days, Jack began helping with the chores. He fed the livestock, repaired fences, and even helped with the milking. Clara watched him carefully, noticing how he approached every task with patience and determination. He wasn't the fastest worker, nor did he rush, but he did things the right way, paying attention to details that many might overlook. As they worked side by side, a subtle bond began to form between them. Clara found herself admiring Jack's quiet strength, the way he handled animals with care, and the respect he showed for the land. Jack, in turn, was impressed by Clara's knowledge and dedication. She moved with a confidence that only came from years of experience, and yet she had a gentle touch that made even the most stubborn animals follow her lead. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire in the small sitting room of the ranch house. Clara would make simple meals, and they would talk about life, dreams, and the challenges they had faced. Sometimes there was a comfortable silence, the kind that comes when two people understand each other without needing words. Jack would gaze out the window at the wide-open fields, thinking about the rare peace he felt here. Clara would glance at him, wondering if he could see the potential of a life built together on this land. Despite the growing connection, there were still moments of tension. Jack struggled with the nature of Clara's request. He respected her honesty and admired her courage, but the idea of becoming part of someone's life for a very specific purpose made him uneasy. He was not used to being asked to play such an important role in someone else's future. Clara, on her part, sensed his hesitation but did not push him. She understood that trust could not be demanded. It had to be earned over time. One afternoon, as they worked in the fields, a sudden storm approached. Dark clouds rolled across the sky, and the wind picked up, rustling the crops and sending dust swirling. Clara and Jack hurried to secure the animals and bring the equipment inside. The storm was fierce, with flashes of lightning and heavy rain that soaked the ground and the two of them within minutes. They worked together seamlessly, their movements synchronized by necessity. Jack held the gate while Clara guided the horses to safety, and in that shared effort, something unspoken passed between them. By the time the storm subsided, the ranch was wet and muddy, but the sense of accomplishment was undeniable. They stood in the barn doorway, breathing heavily, covered in mud but smiling. "We make a good team," Jack said, his voice carrying a hint of admiration. Clara nodded, feeling a warmth in her chest that had little to do with the temperature. "We do," she admitted. "And that's exactly what I need, a partner who can handle both the calm and the chaos." As the days turned into weeks, Jack's presence became a steady part of ranch life. He learned the rhythm of the land, the habits of the animals, and the nuances of Clara's routines. Clara, in turn, began to see him not just as a visitor or a helper, but as someone who could be trusted, someone who could share the responsibilities and joys of the ranch. Their conversations deepened, moving beyond practical matters to personal stories, hopes, and fears. Jack discovered the tenderness behind Clara's strength, the softness in her laughter, and the thoughtfulness in her decisions. Clara realized that Jack's quiet nature hid a depth of understanding and a kind of loyalty that was rare and precious. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat on the porch together, watching the sunset. The sky was painted in brilliant shades of orange, pink, and purple, and the air was filled with the sounds of crickets and distant cattle. Jack broke the comfortable silence. "I didn't expect to find a place like this," he said quietly. "Or someone like you," Clara smiled, a faint blush warming her cheeks. "Neither did I," she admitted. "But perhaps life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it." They talked long into the night, sharing stories of childhood, past experiences, and the dreams they held for the future. There was laughter, gentle teasing, and moments of serious reflection. Each word, each glance, strengthened the bond that was quietly forming between them. It was no longer just about a request or a plan. It was about two people discovering compatibility, respect, and an emerging affection. By the end of part 2, Jack had begun to understand the depth of Clara's desire, not just for an heir, but for a life filled with stability, love, and partnership. Clara had started to see Jack as more than just a solution to her request. He was becoming someone who could share her life, someone who could walk beside her through the challenges and joys of the ranch. The foundation of trust and understanding had been laid, and both knew that the coming days would test and strengthen it further. The ranch, once quiet and solitary, now held a new energy. With Jack's presence, there was a sense of companionship, teamwork, and the quiet promise of something more. The wind carried not just the scent of earth and hay, but also the possibilities of new beginnings, the kind that come when two people find an unexpected connection in the most ordinary of places. And as the moon rose over the plains, both Clara and Jack felt it, the subtle shift from strangers to partners, from strangers sharing space to two people learning to share a life. Life on the ranch continued in its steady rhythm, but it was not without its challenges. Clara had grown used to managing everything alone, from the crops to the animals to the endless chores that came with maintaining such a vast property. Jack's arrival had brought a sense of companionship, yet it also introduced new dynamics that neither of them had fully anticipated. As much as they enjoyed working together, there were moments of tension, small misunderstandings, and the inevitable doubts that came with any significant change. One morning, Clara woke to find that a portion of the fence in the northern pasture had been damaged. The previous night's windstorm had been stronger than they realized, and a section of the wooden rails had splintered and fallen to the ground. Cattle had wandered closer to the edge of the property, and some had even grazed near the neighboring ranch. Clara frowned, feeling a surge of responsibility and frustration. She had hoped to spend the day planting new crops, but now she had to focus on repairing the fence before any animals could escape. Jack, seeing her concern, offered to help. "Don't worry, Clara. We can fix this together," he said calmly, his steady voice giving her a sense of reassurance. They gathered tools, hammer, nails, and fresh wood from the barn and began the repairs. At first, the work went smoothly. They moved efficiently, their hands and bodies in sync with the rhythm of the task. But as the hours passed, exhaustion set in and tempers flared. Jack accidentally splintered a plank while trying to secure it, and Clara's patience wore thin. "It's okay, Jack," she said firmly, trying to maintain control of her temper. "We'll just replace it. Mistakes happen." Jack nodded, though he felt a sting of guilt. He did not want to disappoint Clara, and he certainly did not want to seem careless. They continued working in silence for a while, the tension lingering like the thick dust in the air. Yet even amidst the frustration, there was an unspoken understanding. Both knew that the ranch required hard work and that challenges were inevitable. Their respect for each other deepened, not because of perfection, but because they could navigate difficulties together. Later that week, rumors began to spread in the nearby town. Neighbors noticed Jack staying at the ranch and started to gossip about the nature of his relationship with Clara. Some were curious, others judgmental, and a few even skeptical of her unusual request. Clara tried to ignore the whispers, focusing on her work, but the murmurs found their way back to her. Jack, too, noticed the occasional sideways glance or subtle comments when they visited town for supplies. "I don't like it," Jack said one evening as they returned home. "People talk too much and it seems to bother you." Clara shook her head, smiling faintly. "I've learned to ignore what others think. The ranch is my responsibility, and the only opinion that truly matters is mine, and maybe yours, Jack." Jack smiled, but he could see the slight worry in her eyes. He realized that part of being here meant not only helping on the ranch, but also navigating the social challenges that came with it. He promised himself to support her, no matter the gossip or judgment. Just as they were settling into this new rhythm, another challenge arose. One morning, a sick calf was found lying in the pasture, unable to stand. Clara and Jack rushed to its side, and she immediately began assessing the situation. The calf was weak, and without immediate care it might not survive. Jack assisted, following her directions carefully, handing her tools, water, and bandages. "It's okay, little one," Clara whispered as she worked. "We'll get you through this." The hours stretched on, sweat and worry mixing together as they tended to the calf. By evening, the calf had regained some strength, and Clara allowed herself a sigh of relief. Jack, exhausted but satisfied, looked at her with admiration. "You really care about every life here," he said. Clara nodded, her face softening. "This ranch isn't just land or animals, it's life in every form. That's why I take it so seriously." The incident with the calf brought them closer together, reinforcing their mutual respect and reliance. Yet, it also highlighted the reality of ranch life, the unpredictability, the constant demands, and the need for patience and endurance. They both realized that trust and teamwork were essential, and that challenges, no matter how difficult, could strengthen their bond rather than weaken it. Despite these growing connections, misunderstandings still found their way between them. One evening, after a long day of work, Jack noticed Clara was quieter than usual. He asked if she was upset about the calf earlier or about the fence repairs, but she shook her head, unwilling to admit the source of her unease. "I just have a lot on my mind," she said softly, looking out at the fading light over the fields. Jack wanted to comfort her but hesitated, unsure how to approach the delicate situation. He had never been good at reading subtle emotions, and Clara had always been fiercely independent. He decided to give her space, though he worried that distance might create a gap between them. The following day, a minor accident occurred while they were moving hay bales. Jack's boot slipped, and he almost dropped a heavy bale, but Clara caught it just in time. She scolded him lightly, though her concern was more for his safety than the hay. Jack, embarrassed, felt the tension rise between them again. "I didn't mean to slip," he said, frustration in his voice. Clara took a deep breath. "I know, but we have to be careful. One wrong move and either of us could get hurt." Though the moment passed, it left a lingering sense of unease. Both were learning to navigate a partnership built on mutual dependence, yet neither was used to such closeness. Their growing affection and respect were accompanied by insecurities and doubts, small cracks in an otherwise solid foundation. Amid these challenges, they found moments of laughter and lightness. One evening, Jack attempted to cook dinner for Clara, using a cast-iron skillet over the fire. The meal did not go as planned. The eggs were overcooked, and the bread was slightly burnt, but they laughed together, sharing a simple joy that made the hard work of the day feel worthwhile. These moments reminded them both that life on the ranch was not only about toil and responsibility, but also about companionship, trust, and the little joys that made the effort meaningful. As the weeks passed, both Clara and Jack became more comfortable with each other's presence. They started anticipating each other's movements, completing tasks side by side with a quiet efficiency. The ranch, once a place of solitude for Clara, now felt alive with shared purpose. Jack's presence brought stability, while Clara's leadership and knowledge provided guidance. Together, they discovered a rhythm that was both challenging and rewarding, a balance of work, respect, and emerging affection. Yet the challenges of life on the ranch continued to test them. A sudden illness among the cattle required long hours of care, careful monitoring, and occasional trips to town for supplies. Harsh weather forced them to repair damaged fences repeatedly, and the persistent whispers from neighbors reminded them that their unusual arrangement was still a topic of curiosity. Through it all, Clara and Jack learned to rely on each other, to communicate more openly, and to find strength in partnership. By the end of Part 3, Clara and Jack had faced multiple tests that revealed both their strengths and vulnerabilities. They had learned that trust was built not in easy times, but in moments of difficulty, that understanding required patience, and that partnership meant more than just shared responsibilities. It meant sharing emotions, fears, and hopes as well. The bond between them had grown stronger, shaped by challenges, strengthened by respect, and warmed by the beginnings of genuine affection. As night fell over the plains, Clara looked out at the stars, thinking about the path that lay ahead. She knew that more challenges would come, but she also knew that with Jack by her side, she could face them with confidence. Jack, meanwhile, felt a quiet satisfaction and a growing attachment. He realized that the ranch, the work, and Clara herself had begun to feel like home, a place where he could belong in a way he had never known before. Life on the ranch was not easy, but it was real, and in the midst of challenges and misunderstandings, both Clara and Jack discovered the profound value of partnership, the power of trust, and the subtle joy of shared purpose. The days ahead promised more tests, but they also promised growth, connection, and the possibility of something lasting and meaningful. A bond built not just on necessity, but on respect, understanding, and a slowly blossoming love. The days on the ranch had grown longer and busier, yet a sense of calm had settled over Clara and Jack. They had weathered storms, repaired fences, tended to sick animals, and endured the quiet judgments of neighbors. Slowly, a rhythm had formed between them, one that combined work, shared responsibilities, and small moments of laughter. Yet beneath the surface, emotions stirred that neither of them fully understood or had admitted to themselves. One morning, Clara awoke to find the sky a dull gray, the wind carrying the promise of a storm. She felt a weight on her chest, a mix of responsibility, anticipation, and a quiet, unspoken longing. The ranch required constant attention, and the thought of being without Jack for even a day brought an unfamiliar unease. She knew that he was no longer just a temporary presence. He had become part of the life she had built, part of her daily world, part of her heart. Jack arrived shortly after sunrise, his calm presence offering reassurance. Today, they had to prepare the barn for the approaching storm, secure the animals, and ensure that crops would not be damaged. Jack moved with quiet efficiency, anticipating Clara's instructions, offering help before she asked, and always maintaining a steady focus. Watching him, Clara realized just how much she relied on him, not just for physical tasks, but for emotional balance as well. As the storm approached, dark clouds rolling across the plains, Clara and Jack worked side by side. The wind began to pick up and the first drops of rain fell, heavy and cold. They hurried to secure the gates, bring in the animals and protect the equipment. Amid the rush, Jack stumbled and Clara instinctively grabbed his arm to steady him. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and in that silent connection, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of dependence, care, and a deeper feeling that had begun to grow over weeks of shared work. Once the animals were safe and the barn doors secured, they took shelter inside. The storm raged outside, lightning illuminating the barn in brief, bright flashes, thunder rumbling through the sky. Clara felt a mixture of relief and tension. She had managed storms before, but this one brought a new awareness of how much she valued Jack's presence. He was no longer just a helper. He was a partner, someone whose steady hands and calm mind made her feel supported in ways she had never known. "Clara," Jack said softly, breaking the silence, "there's something I need to tell you. I've been thinking a lot about us and about this ranch." Clara looked at him, her heart skipping a beat. She had sensed the closeness growing between them, but hearing it spoken aloud made her feel both nervous and hopeful. "What is it, Jack?" she asked, her voice steady but gentle. "I care about you," he said slowly, choosing his words with care. "Not just because of this arrangement or the work we do together, but because of you. I feel like I belong here with you, and I want more than just to help. I want to be part of your life, truly." Clara felt a rush of warmth and relief. She had imagined this moment countless times, but the reality was more profound than she expected. She reached for his hand, feeling the roughness of his work-worn skin against hers. "Jack," she whispered, "I feel the same. I was afraid to admit it, but I've realized I want you here, not just to fulfill a plan, but because I want you in my life." The storm outside mirrored the intensity of their emotions, a fierce energy that seemed to echo the rush of feelings inside them. They sat together in silence for a moment, simply holding hands, listening to the rain battering the barn roof, and feeling the quiet strength of connection between them. In that moment, the barriers of uncertainty, hesitation, and past experiences seemed to dissolve, leaving only trust, understanding, and a growing love. But life on the ranch was never simple. The next morning brought new challenges. A neighboring rancher, skeptical of Clara and Jack's arrangement, came by to confront them about the previous storm and the possibility of livestock straying onto his land. He questioned Jack's presence, his intentions, and the unusual nature of Clara's request. Clara, usually composed and confident, felt a surge of frustration and defensiveness. Jack, standing beside her, offered support, speaking calmly and respectfully to the neighbor, diffusing the tension with patience and reason. This confrontation reminded Clara that while personal feelings could grow quietly and deeply, the world outside still held judgment, curiosity, and sometimes resistance. She realized that trusting Jack fully meant not only relying on him in private moments, but also facing public challenges together. Their bond was tested not by love alone, but by the realities of life on the ranch, the responsibilities they shared, and the expectations of the community around them. Amid these external pressures, internal struggles continued to arise. Jack, though increasingly devoted to Clara, wrestled with the nature of her request. The idea of fatherhood, of taking part in creating an heir, was both daunting and deeply meaningful. He questioned his readiness, his ability to provide, and the responsibilities that came with such a role. Clara, aware of his hesitation, approached the subject with care, never forcing, never demanding, but sharing her hopes, fears, and the deeper reasons behind her plan. She spoke not of obligation, but of trust, partnership, and a shared vision for the future. One evening, after a long day repairing fences damaged by the storm, they sat together under the stars. The world around them was quiet, the plains stretching endlessly in every direction. Jack spoke of his fears and uncertainties, of the doubts that had plagued him since their first conversation. Clara listened attentively, offering gentle words of reassurance. She explained that she did not expect perfection, only honesty, commitment, and the willingness to face life together. "I don't want to fail you," Jack said, his voice low, filled with sincerity. "You won't," Clara replied, her hand resting over his. "We'll face everything together. That's what matters. Not the plan, not the outcome, but the journey we share along the way." That night, they both lay awake in the small guest room of the ranch house, thinking about the future, the responsibilities ahead, and the deeper connection they had discovered. They understood that their lives were now intertwined, not just through work or necessity, but through trust, affection, and a shared vision of a life built together. The turning point had come not from a single dramatic event, but from the accumulation of shared experiences, challenges, and the quiet realization that neither wanted to face the world alone anymore. In the days that followed, Clara and Jack began planning more intentionally for the future. They discussed the logistics of raising an heir, the timing, and the responsibilities that would come with it. But beyond the practical matters, they explored their emotions, hopes, and dreams. They laughed together, worked together, and found moments of quiet intimacy that strengthened their bond. The ranch became not just a place of work, but a place of shared life, shared purpose, and shared love. One afternoon, while planting new crops in the fields, Jack paused to look at Clara. She was focused, her hands skillfully tending to the soil, and he realized just how remarkable she was. He saw the determination in her eyes, the quiet strength in her posture, and the warmth in her smile when she looked at him. In that moment, he understood that the bond they had formed was not temporary. It was enduring, built on respect, understanding, and a mutual desire for a life shared together. Clara, sensing his gaze, looked up and smiled. "We're making progress," she said, her voice light but filled with meaning. "Not just with the fields, but with us." Jack nodded, feeling a deep sense of contentment. "Yes, with us," he echoed. By the end of part 4, Clara and Jack had reached a turning point in their relationship. They had faced external pressures, internal doubts, and the challenges of life on the ranch. And through it all, they had discovered a profound connection. Their partnership was no longer just practical. It was emotional, personal, and deeply significant. They had learned that love was not about grand gestures or dramatic moments, but about trust, patience, understanding, and the willingness to face life's difficulties together. The ranch, once a place of solitude and hard work, now thrummed with quiet energy and possibility. The storms they had weathered, both literal and emotional, had forged a bond that was strong, steady, and enduring. And as the sun set over the plains, casting long shadows across the fields, Clara and Jack stood side by side, ready to face the future together. Whatever it might hold, with courage, trust, and the quiet joy of shared life. The ranch had grown quieter over the past few months, not because work had slowed, but because a sense of balance had finally settled over Clara and Jack. Together they had faced storms, repaired fences, tended to sick animals, and navigated the judgments of neighbors. Every challenge had strengthened their bond, and now the ranch felt more like a home than it ever had before. Jack's presence had become a natural part of daily life, and Clara felt a peace she had not known in years. One morning, Clara awoke to the soft light of dawn filtering through the curtains. She stretched and looked out over the fields, noticing the dew sparkling on the grass and the gentle movements of the cattle grazing. Life on the ranch had never been easy, but now it carried a sense of purpose, companionship, and hope. Today, she thought, they would take the next steps toward building the family and future she had long dreamed of. Jack arrived shortly after sunrise, riding his horse calmly across the yard. His expression was thoughtful, but there was a softness in his eyes that mirrored the feelings they had shared for months. Clara watched him approach, her heart swelling with quiet affection. "Morning," she said, her voice warm. "Morning," he replied, tipping his hat with a small smile. "Ready for another day," Clara laughed lightly. Always, there's work to do as usual, but today I think we also have some planning to do. They spent the morning attending to the animals and the fields, moving with an easy rhythm born from weeks of working side by side. The storm that had once tested them now felt like a distant memory, replaced by a confidence in their partnership and abilities. Each task completed was a reminder of what they could achieve together, and each glance shared carried a silent acknowledgement of the feelings that had grown between them. By midday, they took a break under the shade of a large oak tree at the edge of the fields. Clara brought out a simple picnic she had prepared, and they sat together, enjoying the warm sun and gentle breeze. Conversation turned to the future, the ranch, their plans, and the child they both hoped to welcome into their lives one day. Jack spoke first, his voice quiet but determined. "I've been thinking about what it means to be part of this life, to help you build what you've dreamed of. I want to be the kind of man who can stand by you, support you, and be part of your family, not just for today but for the long term." Clara felt a wave of emotion. She had dreamed of this moment for years, but hearing it spoken aloud by someone she trusted and cared for made it all the more real. "That's exactly what I hoped for," she said softly. "Not just help, but partnership, love, and commitment. That's what matters." They spent the afternoon making plans, discussing responsibilities, and envisioning a future filled with shared work, love, and family. They spoke of the routines, the challenges, and the joys that would come with raising a child on the ranch, teaching them to respect the land, animals, and the values that Clara held dear. There was laughter, gentle teasing, and moments of quiet reflection, each conversation building the foundation for a life they would create together. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Clara and Jack walked through the fields together. The air was warm, carrying the scent of hay, earth, and the river nearby. They paused by the barn, leaning against the wooden railing, watching the animals settle in for the night. "I never imagined life could feel like this," Jack said, his voice filled with awe. "I've wandered a lot, but I think I've finally found where I belong." Clara smiled, her heart full. "And I've found someone I can trust, someone I can rely on, and someone I want to share everything with." The months passed, and with each passing day, the bond between Clara and Jack grew stronger. They worked, laughed, and dreamed together, building a life that was both practical and filled with warmth. Friends and neighbors began to notice the change in Clara, her confidence, her contentment, and the quiet strength of a partnership that was evident to anyone who spent time at the ranch. Jack, too, found that he no longer felt the pull of wandering or solitude. The ranch, the work, and most importantly, Clara herself, had become his home. One evening, under a sky filled with stars, Clara and Jack sat by the fire pit outside the ranch house. The night was quiet, the only sounds the soft crackle of the fire and the occasional rustle of animals in the distance. Clara leaned against Jack, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, a comforting presence in the stillness. "Jack," she whispered, "I think we're ready. Ready for the next step, for the life we've imagined together." Jack turned to her, his expression serious but filled with warmth. "I've been thinking the same thing. I want to do this, not because it's expected, but because I want to build a life with you and a family with you." They shared a quiet moment, understanding that their journey had not been simple, but that every challenge, every storm, and every effort had led them to this point. Trust, respect, and love had guided them, and now the future felt full of possibility. The following weeks were filled with preparation and care. They worked together to organize the ranch, ensure everything was ready for the changes to come, and spend meaningful time enjoying each other's company. They planted new crops, repaired fences, and shared quiet evenings under the stars, feeling the deep satisfaction of creating a life together. Each day was a mixture of hard work and quiet joy, a balance that neither had experienced before. One afternoon, as they walked through the fields, Clara paused to look at the horizon. The sun was high, casting a golden glow over the landscape, and she felt a sense of gratitude and contentment she had not known in years. "It feels right, doesn't it?" she said, turning to Jack. Jack nodded, taking her hand in his. "Yes, it does, more than I ever imagined." They embraced, feeling the warmth of their connection, the comfort of shared experience, and the promise of a future built on trust, love, and partnership. The ranch, once a place of solitude and responsibility, had become a home filled with hope, laughter, and the quiet expectation of new life. As the seasons changed, Clara and Jack continued to grow closer. The child they hoped for became a real possibility, a symbol of their shared dreams and commitment. Their days were busy but fulfilling, filled with work, learning, and discovery. They celebrated small victories, supported each other through difficulties, and found joy in the simple pleasures of life on the ranch. Neighbors who had once whispered now looked upon them with respect and admiration. They saw not just a woman and a man working together, but a partnership built on mutual understanding, dedication, and love. Clara and Jack had created something rare, a life that balanced responsibility with emotion, work with intimacy, and dreams with reality. Finally, one peaceful evening, as the sun set in brilliant hues over the plains, Clara and Jack stood together on the porch of the ranch house. The animals were calm, the field stretched endlessly before them, and the quiet of the evening settled over the land like a gentle blanket. They looked at each other, hearts full, knowing that the journey they had begun months ago had led to this moment, a moment of fulfillment, love, and shared purpose. Jack spoke softly. "We've come a long way." Clara smiled, her eyes shining. "And we have so much more ahead of us." Together, they held hands, feeling the strength of their connection, the comfort of their shared life, and the quiet excitement of a future filled with possibilities. The ranch, the land, and the life they had built together were more than just a home. They were a testament to trust, partnership, and love. As night fell, Clara and Jack knew that the story of their lives was only beginning. The foundation was laid, the bond was strong, and the path forward was bright with hope. Together, they would face challenges, celebrate joys, and create a family rooted in love, respect, and the enduring beauty of life on the ranch. The plains stretched endlessly before them, quiet and full of promise. And in that stillness, Clara and Jack found a sense of completeness they had long sought, not in plans or arrangements, but in the simple, enduring power of partnership, love, and the shared dream of a life fully lived.